Only special people get excluded in such a cruel way. That's the phrase I repeated to myself over and over while staring at the wedding invitation my daughter had sent me. A card so delicate, with gold letters and the scent of roses pressed between the pages. But my name wasn't there. Not on the list of guests, not on the seat reservations, not in the memories they were preparing to celebrate. My own daughter had erased me. The air in my small living room in Denver felt heavy, like it hadn't moved in hours. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the blinds, highlighting the dust dancing in the silence. On the coffee table, that envelope became a weapon, cutting deeper than any knife could. I pressed my fingers against the fabric of my old blue dress, the one I had been saving for years, always telling myself, one day, when Sarah gets married, I'll finally wear it. I had protected it like a treasure, wrapped in plastic, stored in the back of my closet. It still smelled faintly of lavender sachets I tucked between its folds. A dress waiting for a celebration, a mother waiting for her place. But what I got instead was exclusion. My daughter Sarah, the one for whom I gave up so much, was preparing a new life and I was not invited. That night, the silence of the house pressed against my chest. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the invitation again, wondering what I had done to deserve this. The clock ticked loudly, as if mocking my insomnia. I had sacrificed years of work, health, and joy for her, and now she was pushing me away. In that darkness, one thought began to take root, sharp and unbearable. Were they trying to destroy me completely? I woke up with the invitation still on the nightstand, its edges bent from how tightly I had gripped it during the night. My eyes felt swollen, my body heavy, and yet the first thought that pierced my mind was not sleep, nor rest, but the long inventory of everything I had given up for Sarah. Over the years, my hands had worked until they cracked. Double shifts at the hospital, nights on my feet, Christmases passed in sterile hallways instead of at the dinner table. All so that she could have ballet lessons, piano classes, books, summer camps. I denied myself vacations, postponed doctor's appointments, ignored back pain that only grew sharper with time. I told myself, one day, she will understand. One day, it will all be worth it. The numbers etched themselves into my memory like wounds. $42,000 spent on her college tuition, 7 years of loans still slowly bleeding from my account, hundreds of hours driving to and from part-time jobs, just to make sure her rent was paid on time. I even sold my mother's bracelet, my only inheritance, to cover one semester she couldn't afford. And yet, she erased me with one stroke of her pen. On the dresser, right beside my old jewelry box, I kept a small velvet pouch. Inside, wrapped carefully, was the wedding gift I had been preparing for her, a silver necklace with a small locket. Inside the locket was a photo of her as a child, missing her 2 front teeth, smiling with arms wrapped around me. That necklace was supposed to be her something old at the ceremony. I had imagined her face lighting up when she opened it. But now I knew it would stay sealed, a secret only I carried. The more I listed my sacrifices, the more suffocated I felt. It wasn't just the money, nor the endless hours of work. It was my health, my peace, my very identity as a woman. I had allowed myself to shrink so she could expand, and in return, I was left outside the door of her happiness. I stared again at the old blue dress, still waiting in the closet. Its fabric seemed to mock me, whispering, "What did you give your life away for?" In that moment, my chest burned with a mixture of grief and indignation. And yet, a question pulsed, darker and more dangerous than all others. If they could exclude me from a wedding, what else could they erase me from? The following week, I gathered the courage to call Sarah. My hands trembled as I dialed her number, the receiver slick with the sweat of my palms. I wanted to believe this had been a mistake, some misprint or misunderstanding. Maybe the invitation was symbolic. Maybe she had planned a private moment with me later. Hope clung to me like the last light of a candle. When she answered, her voice was cold, flat, almost businesslike. "Mom, what is it? I'm busy." I swallowed, forcing the words out gently. "Sweetheart, I received the wedding invitation. There must have been a mistake. I didn't see my name. Surely you didn't mean to exclude me." Her silence was sharp, slicing through the line. Then came the words that shattered the thin glass of my hope. "There was no mistake, Mom. You're not coming. I don't want drama at my wedding." Drama. That was what she called me. A woman who had carried her, fed her, sacrificed everything, now reduced to nothing more than a nuisance. My voice cracked, and I begged, "Sarah, I've been dreaming of this day. I bought a dress years ago. I have a gift for you. Please, Her interruption was a whip. "Enough. You suffocate me. You always make everything about you. This is my life, my choice. And if you can't respect that, then maybe it's better if we stop talking altogether." Her words left me breathless, like the air had been punched out of my lungs. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the line. And then she hung up. The house was silent again, but this time, it felt like silence after an explosion. My ears rang. My chest ached. And the worst part was that her words echoed louder inside my head than they had on the phone. "You suffocate me. Drama. Better if we stop talking." I pressed the locket against my palm until its edges dug painfully into my skin. The silver felt cold, merciless. It wasn't just an exclusion anymore. It was contempt, a deliberate effort to erase my presence, my sacrifices, my very existence. And as I sat alone, I realized something chilling. If she could dismiss me so easily now, what else could she and her brother try to take from me in the future? That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook open. For years, I had been transferring small amounts each month to Sarah and to Daniel, my son. Rent help, grocery money. Just until they got stable. Somehow that "until" had stretched into more than a decade. I had convinced myself it was love, support, motherhood. But looking at the empty spaces in my life, the dress unworn, the gift unopened, I finally saw it for what it was. Dependence carefully disguised as affection. The numbers did not lie. In the past 12 months alone, I had sent over $11,000. Money that had forced me to postpone a dental surgery. Money that should have been spent fixing the leak in my roof. Money that drained my life drop by drop. With trembling hands, I wrote the final notes. Account closed. Automatic transfers canceled. It felt like cutting an umbilical cord with rusty scissors. Painful, but necessary. For the first time in years, I was saying no. The silence in the house changed that evening. Lighter, almost like the air could finally circulate. I even brewed a cup of tea for myself, chamomile, the steam fogging my glasses as if blessing my decision. I whispered, "I deserve peace." But peace never lasts long, when people feed on your sacrifices. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. First, Daniel. "Mom, what the hell happened? My rent didn't go through. Did you forget?" Then Sarah, sharper, more venomous. "Are you trying to punish us? You can't just cut us off like that, after everything we've done for you." Everything they had done for me? The irony burned like acid in my stomach. By afternoon, the calls turned frantic, then furious. I let them ring, each vibration on the wooden table like a drumbeat of war approaching. At dusk, when I thought the storm had calmed, I looked out the window and saw Daniel's car pulling into my driveway. His headlights lit up the living room wall like interrogation lamps. He stepped out, slamming the door, his shadow stretching long against the siding of the house. My chest tightened. My small victory had already awakened their fury. Daniel didn't even knock. He stormed into the house the way he always had, like it still belonged to him, though he hadn't lived there in more than 10 years. His cologne, sharp, synthetic, almost suffocating, filled the hallway. He tossed his jacket over a chair, pacing back and forth, his voice already raised. "Mom, what are you doing? Do you realize how humiliating this is? Sarah and I have commitments, expenses. You can't just pull the rug from under us like that." I stood near the kitchen counter, clutching the porcelain cup of cold tea I hadn't finished that morning. My hands shook, but I forced my voice steady. "I have supported you both for long enough. I can't keep sacrificing everything while you treat me like I don't matter." He laughed, an ugly, bitter laugh. "Don't matter? We're your children. Everything you have is because of us. You owe us. If you cut us off, don't be surprised if people start asking questions about your condition." "Condition?" My voice cracked. He leaned closer, lowering his tone into something darker. "You forget things. You repeat yourself. Neighbors have noticed. Don't make me and Sarah go to court and ask for guardianship. If we prove you can't take care of yourself, the bank accounts will be ours to manage. All of them." The words hit me like ice water poured down my spine. Guardianship, curatela. They weren't just angry at losing money. They were planning to take control of my life. Before I could answer, Sarah's face appeared on my phone screen. Another video call, her eyes flashing with rehearsed indignation. "Mom, Daniel's right. We've been patient, but you're making reckless choices. If you don't reconsider, we'll have no choice but to involve the law. Imagine what the neighbors will say when they hear you're unstable. Is that how you want to end your life? Alone, with no one to trust?" I pressed my back against the wall, the cool plaster the only thing keeping me upright. Their voices overlapped, accusations, warnings, threats, filling the kitchen like smoke in a burning house. My cup slipped from my hands, shattering on the tile floor. And as shards spread across my feet, I realized the truth. This wasn't just about a wedding or money. This was war. The morning after Daniel's invasion, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table again, but this time surrounded by fragments of broken porcelain I hadn't yet gathered. The silence of the house was shattered by echoes of their threats: guardianship, instability, humiliation. My chest tightened with every memory of their words. For the first time, I feared they might succeed. That fear pushed me to reach for a card tucked inside my old recipe book. It was from Thomas Green, an attorney I had met years ago when the hospital where I worked was settling an insurance claim. He had been kind back then, patient enough to explain things no one else cared to. My hands shook as I dialed his number, unsure if he would even remember me. He answered with a calm, steady tone. "Mrs. Parker? Of course I remember you. What's going on?" When I told him about Sarah and Daniel, about the threats, the accusations, his silence was heavy, but not dismissive. Finally, he said, "You need to start documenting everything. Every word, every message, every incident. If they're serious about pursuing guardianship, evidence will be your only shield." His voice carried an authority that grounded me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was on my side. That evening, I pulled out a notebook with a faded leather cover, one I had once used to write shopping lists and family recipes. Now it would serve a different purpose. I began recording everything: dates, times, exact words. I printed out text messages, saved voicemails, even described Daniel's expression when he threatened me. The act itself was oddly empowering. Each page I filled was like placing a brick in a wall to defend myself. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had proof. The next day, Thomas came by my house. He was taller than I remembered, his hair now peppered with gray. But his eyes carried the same calm determination. He walked through the living room, noting the broken teacup I had left on purpose. "Keep it," he said. "It shows the state you were left in after their visit. Sometimes silence tells a stronger story than words." I watched him write notes of his own, his pen scratching steadily against the paper. For the first time, I felt the air shift. Not lighter, but steadier, as if the ground beneath me was holding firm again. Still, as he packed his briefcase to leave, he gave me one last warning. "This isn't over. They'll push harder before they let go. Be ready." And I knew he was right, because as I walked him to the door, I saw a car idling across the street. Daniel's car. He was watching. 2 weeks later, the knock came at the door. Not Daniel's pounding, not Sarah's dramatic insistence, but a firm, measured rhythm that sent a chill through me. When I opened it, 2 figures stood there. A woman with a clipboard and a badge clipped to her blazer, and a uniformed police officer just behind her. "Mrs. Parker?" the woman asked, her tone polite but distant. "I'm Claire Mitchell, from Adult Protective Services. We've received a report about possible self-neglect and financial instability. We'd like to speak with you." For a moment, my knees nearly buckled. My children had actually filed something against me. They had turned their threats into an official complaint. I stepped aside, letting them into my living room. Claire's eyes scanned everything: the worn sofa, the stack of printed bank statements on the table, even the broken porcelain I had carefully left visible, as Thomas had advised. The officer remained near the door, silent, observing. I tried to steady my voice. "I assure you, I'm fine. I pay my bills. I keep records. My children, they're upset because I stopped giving them money." Claire wrote something on her clipboard. "We'll need to see some documentation of your finances, Mrs. Parker, and we may ask a few questions to evaluate your cognitive state." I retrieved the leather notebook, sliding it across the table. Page after page, my handwriting told the story. Dates, times, direct quotes from Sarah and Daniel. Next to it, I placed the bank statements, showing every transfer I had made, each one like a scar. Claire flipped through them, her expression unreadable. "You've been giving your adult children quite a lot of financial support." I nodded. "Yes, and I chose to stop. That's my right." Her pen hovered, hesitated. Then she looked up, studying me in silence. I couldn't tell if she believed me, or if the seeds Sarah and Daniel had planted were already taking root. The officer finally spoke. His voice was low, but firm. "Ma'am, if what you're saying is true, this is serious. But I have to be honest. Families can be persuasive in court. Do you have anyone else who can confirm your side of the story?" Thomas's words echoed in my mind. "Document everything. But would that be enough?" I clasped my hands together, forcing myself to meet Claire's gaze. "Yes, I have an attorney, and I'm prepared to defend myself." For a long moment, she just looked at me, her pen still hovering above the page. Then she closed the folder with a soft snap. "Very well. We'll review this further. In the meantime, Mrs. Parker, I suggest you keep gathering as much evidence as you can." As they left, I stood frozen in the doorway, watching their car disappear down the street. The silence of the house returned, but it no longer felt like safety. It felt like the calm before a storm. And deep inside, one thought clawed its way forward. What if the judge believes them, not me? That night, after the visit from Adult Protective Services, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house seemed louder, every shadow heavier. I wandered from room to room, touching objects as if they could anchor me. The framed photo of Sarah as a toddler in pigtails, the quilt my mother had sewn before her hands stiffened with arthritis, the locket hidden away in the drawer. Each item whispered both love and betrayal. I stopped in front of the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look like the mother I remembered. Her hair, streaked with silver, fell in loose strands. The lines around her eyes were deeper than she wanted to admit. But it was the expression that hurt most. The constant worry, the fear etched into her face, as if it had become her identity. My throat tightened as I whispered, "When did I stop being a person and become just a source?" Tears blurred my reflection, but I didn't look away. For the first time in years, I saw myself, not the caregiver, not the sacrifice, not the mother begging for scraps of affection. Just a woman who was tired, bruised yet still standing. I opened the locket again, running my thumb over the tiny photograph. The child who had once clung to me had grown into a woman who now wanted to erase me. And still, part of me ached for her, longed to be included in her joy. The paradox tore at me. The same hands that had built her future were now the ones she wanted restrained. I knelt beside my bed, something I hadn't done in years. The carpet pressed into my knees as I whispered a prayer, clumsy, hesitant. Lord, I've given everything I had. I don't ask for riches, or even love. But please, let me keep my dignity. Let me not disappear before my time. A strange calm washed over me then. Not the absence of pain, but a clarity sharper than the fear. A phrase rose inside me, as if spoken by a voice I had long forgotten. I deserve to be cared for, too. I repeated it aloud, steadying my breath. I deserve to be cared for, too. The words filled the room, fragile but undeniable, and with them came a realization. Perhaps forgiveness would have its place someday, but not before boundaries. Still, as I lay back on the bed, the silence pressed in again. My children had set their trap, witnesses, lawyers, lies. And now the system itself might be listening more to them than to me. I closed my eyes, gripping the locket like a talisman. Tomorrow would bring more battles, but tonight, for the first time, I had claimed a truth for myself. And yet, a terrifying question lingered. Would that truth be enough to survive the lies? The next week, Thomas called me into his office in downtown Denver. His desk was neat, papers aligned in sharp stacks, but his eyes betrayed unease. He slid a folder toward me. "Your children are moving quickly," he said. "They've gathered affidavits, statements from people in your community." I opened the folder with trembling fingers. Each page was a knife. The first was from Mr. Harlan, the neighbor across the street, the same man who once borrowed my ladder every spring and never returned it. His handwriting scrawled, "I've seen Mrs. Parker wandering outside late at night, talking to herself. She often forgets to bring in her mail." Lies, half-truths twisted into daggers. Yes, I had stood outside at night when sleep abandoned me. But talking to myself, forgetting mail. I had stacks carefully filed in my kitchen drawer. The next page hurt worse. A note from the pharmacist I had trusted for years. "Mrs. Parker has repeatedly confused her prescriptions. She asked me the same question 3 times in one visit." I closed my eyes, remembering that day. My back had been aching, my mind exhausted. I had asked twice, not 3 times, about side effects. I had been cautious, not confused. Yet now that moment was painted as proof of incompetence. One affidavit after another, piling up like stones on my chest. My children's narrative was spreading, infecting those around me. Suddenly, the world felt hostile, every glance a potential accusation. Thomas leaned forward, his voice low but steady. This is their strategy. They're building a portrait of you as incapable. It's not the truth, but perception is powerful in court. I gripped the leather notebook tighter, the only shield I had. What if the judge believes them? What if all my sacrifices vanish into their lies? His eyes softened, but his words remained firm. Then we prove otherwise. But you need to understand, this will get uglier before it gets better. They will use anyone they can to corner you. That night, walking back to my car, I felt the city pressing in on me. The headlights, the honking horns, the hurried strangers. They all blurred into one oppressive weight. My reflection in a shop window caught me off guard. A woman small, almost fragile, clutching a notebook as if it were armor. And the question gnawed louder than ever. When the moment comes, who will the judge believe? The mother who gave everything, or the children who learned to twist the truth? Thomas spread the documents across his desk like pieces of a battlefield map. The affidavits, the financial records, my carefully written notes, all of it lay before us, fragile shields against the storm Sarah and Daniel had unleashed. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, a scent that reminded me of order, of structure, of reason. He adjusted his glasses, tapping one affidavit with his pen. This pharmacist's statement. We'll challenge it with the records of your medication refills. There are no lapses, no overdoses. We'll also present your doctor's certification of full cognitive capacity. That will be a cornerstone. I nodded, but my throat was tight. And the neighbor? He says I wander at night. Thomas leaned back, sighing. That's subjective. You're allowed to walk outside. We'll argue it's simply stress. But the real weight will be in your consistency. Every document you've kept, every date, every receipt. We'll show the judge that your mind is precise, not failing. I clutched my notebook against my chest. Its worn leather edges had grown darker with use, like it was absorbing my fear and determination at once. As he spoke strategy, my mind drifted, back to the endless nights at the hospital, the hours bent over IV machines, the way my hands used to tremble from fatigue but still held steady when caring for patients. I remembered Sarah's ballet recitals, Daniel's science projects, both of them smiling proudly as if they had built their futures alone, while I quietly worked myself into exhaustion to fund it all. Now those same children sat across a courtroom aisle, preparing to argue I was incompetent. Mrs. Parker? Thomas's voice pulled me back. His gaze was steady. You need to be ready. Court isn't just facts, it's presence. You must look composed, clear, unwavering. They will try to rattle you. They will call you emotional, unstable. Don't give them that weapon. I nodded, swallowing hard. I'll be ready. On the drive home, Denver's streets glowed with yellow streetlights, reflecting off the damp pavement. Each red light felt like an eternity, forcing me to sit with the weight of my past. How many times had I chosen silence, obedience, sacrifice? And now, my silence would be twisted into proof against me if I let it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, whispering to myself, I won't disappear, not this time. But deep inside, I knew. The closer the trial approached, the closer I came to the possibility of losing everything. And as I pulled into my driveway, headlights flared behind me. A car idled too close, its engine rumbling like a growl. Daniel's silhouette sat in the driver's seat, watching, waiting. The battle was no longer approaching. It was here. The courthouse in Denver loomed before me like a cathedral of judgment, its stone steps cold beneath my shoes. Inside, the air was sharp with disinfectant and whispers. Every sound echoed, heels against tile, papers shuffling, a cough too loud. I clutched the leather notebook to my chest as though it were a lifeline. In the courtroom, the judge sat elevated, framed by the state seal. His face was unreadable, his eyes fixed on the files before him. To his right, the clerk adjusted microphones. To his left, a bailiff stood like a silent sentinel. Sarah and Daniel sat across from me. My children. But their faces were strangers, stone masks carved from resentment and entitlement. Sarah wore a pale blazer, her hair pulled back in a polished bun. Daniel leaned casually, as though the outcome were already his. When Sarah's eyes flicked to mine, there was no trace of the little girl who once fell asleep on my shoulder. Only calculation. The judge's voice broke the silence. We are here to hear the petition for guardianship filed by Sarah Parker and Daniel Parker against their mother, Mrs. Evelyn Parker. Petitioners, you may begin. Sarah rose, her voice soft, almost sorrowful, as if rehearsed for maximum effect. Your Honor, this is not easy for us. We love our mother, but she has been showing signs of confusion and poor judgment. She refuses help, isolates herself, and recently made reckless financial decisions that endanger her well-being. We fear she cannot manage her affairs alone. Her words wrapped in honey, but beneath was venom. Daniel stood next, his tone sharper. Your Honor, I've witnessed it myself. She forgets conversations, mismanages medications, and acts paranoid. We are not here for money. We just want to protect her. But if she continues like this, she could lose everything. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. My breath caught. Paranoid? Mismanaging medication? Lies dressed as concern. I glanced at Thomas. His jaw was set, his hand resting calmly on the table, signaling me to wait. But my heart pounded so hard, I feared the judge could hear it. When Sarah sat back down, she reached for Daniel's hand. To anyone watching, they looked like loving children, burdened with a difficult choice. To me, they were strangers armed with rehearsed cruelty. The judge scribbled notes, his face a mask. He looked up, his eyes settling briefly on me before turning to Thomas. Defense will have the opportunity to respond shortly. For now, I want to hear the petitioner's witnesses. And as I sat frozen, I knew the next minutes would be the most dangerous, because their allies would enter, ready to turn shadows into chains. The clerk called the first witness, and my stomach tightened when I saw Mr. Harlan, the neighbor who had written that cruel affidavit, take the stand. He adjusted his glasses, speaking with exaggerated pauses. Yes, I've seen Mrs. Parker walking outside late at night. Sometimes she seems confused. Once, she stood by her mailbox for nearly 10 minutes without moving. His words landed like stones, but Thomas rose smoothly. Mr. Harlan, do you know why she was at the mailbox that night? Harlan blinked, caught off guard. Well, no. Thomas stepped closer, holding up a photograph from my notebook. Me kneeling at the mailbox in the rain, placing flowers at its base. Mrs. Parker was commemorating the anniversary of her husband's death. Would you call that confusion or grief? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Harlan shifted in his seat, his confidence faltering. Next came the pharmacist. She repeated her claim that I had asked the same question 3 times in one visit, but Thomas presented the pharmacy logs. Every prescription filled correctly, no errors, no missed doses. Then my doctor took the stand, his testimony clear and steady. Mrs. Parker's memory and cognition are entirely intact for her age. There is no medical basis to claim incompetence. Each word was like light breaking through a storm. Finally, Thomas handed the judge a thick folder. Bank statements, receipts, every note from my leather notebook. He spoke firmly, his voice resonating across the silent room. Your Honor, this is not a case of incapacity. This is a case of exploitation. Mrs. Parker has financially supported her adult children for over a decade, to the detriment of her own health and comfort. When she finally exercised her right to say no, they retaliated with this petition. This is not protection. It is control. I sat frozen, the locket hidden in my palm, pressing against my skin like a heartbeat. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. He shuffled through the papers, his silence stretching across the room until every breath felt heavy. Then he spoke, slowly, deliberately. I will deliver my decision after one final review. But I must say, the evidence before me raises serious concerns about the petitioner's motives. Sarah's face flushed red. Daniel's jaw tightened. For the first time, cracks appeared in their perfect masks. And in that moment, I knew the truth was finally pushing its way into the light. Still, my fate hung on the judge's next words. The courtroom was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock above the judge's bench. I could feel every second pressing against my chest, each one a reminder that my entire life, my freedom, my dignity, was about to be decided. I kept my hand around the locket in my pocket, its edges cutting gently into my palm, as if anchoring me to the present. The judge cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping from Sarah and Daniel to me. His voice carried the weight of finality. Having reviewed all testimony, documents, and expert evaluations, I find no evidence that Mrs. Evelyn Parker is incapable of managing her affairs. On the contrary, the records demonstrate consistency, organization, and full capacity. The petition for guardianship is therefore denied. The words struck like a sudden burst of light. My breath caught in my throat, my body trembling with relief. But the judge wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his tone sharper now. I must also note troubling signs regarding the petitioner's motives. The financial records show extensive dependence on Mrs. Parker's resources, followed by retaliation when she chose to stop. This court views such behavior with deep concern. Adult children are not entitled to exploit their parents under the guise of protection. A wave of murmurs swept across the courtroom. Sarah's face drained of color, her polished composure crumbling. Daniel muttered under his breath, his fists tightening on the table. For the first time, their power faltered under the weight of truth. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I straightened my back, my voice steady as I whispered, "Not for the court, but for myself. I am still here." Thomas placed a reassuring hand on mine. "It's over," he said softly. But as I looked at my children, my own flesh and blood, I felt no triumph, only a deep, aching grief. Because even though I had won my freedom, I had lost something far greater, the illusion that love alone could protect me from their betrayal. Still, the gavel struck, sealing the judgment. The sound echoed like a final chord, reverberating through my bones. I walked out of the courtroom into the bright Colorado sun, the air sharp and cold against my cheeks, and though my heart was heavy, my steps carried a strange, unfamiliar strength. The battle was decided, but the war within me, the war between forgiveness and the wounds of betrayal, was only beginning. The weeks after the verdict felt like learning to breathe again. For the first time in years, I woke up without the dread of my phone buzzing with demands or accusations. The silence in the house no longer pressed against me. It expanded, giving me space to rediscover myself. I opened the closet one morning and touched the blue dress that had waited for decades. Instead of grief, I felt curiosity. Why should it remain captive to a wedding that had rejected me? I wore it on a Saturday evening, just to take myself to dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. The maitre d' complimented the color. For the first time, I felt seen not as a mother, not as a provider, but simply as a woman. I began traveling, small trips at first, a weekend in Santa Fe, a week by the ocean in Maine. I walked through markets, tasted foods I had never tried, and wrote postcards to myself, reminders that life still stretched ahead. My journal grew thick with reflections, not accusations. The silver locket once destined for Sarah, I kept. But I changed the photograph inside. Instead of her childhood smile, I placed a picture of myself in that blue dress, standing under the Colorado sun. It became a symbol, not of what I lost, but of what I reclaimed. I also started donating small amounts to a local shelter for women who had been manipulated or abandoned by their families. Each check I signed felt like rewriting my story, no longer the victim of my sacrifices, but the author of my choices. People asked me if I missed my children. The truth was complicated. The ache never vanished completely. Some nights I still reached for the phone before reminding myself of the silence that would follow. But I learned something essential. Setting boundaries does not kill love. It reveals its truth. And sometimes the truth is painful. One evening, as the sun sank behind the Rockies, I sat on my porch, sipping tea, and whispered the words that had once terrified me. I deserved to be cared for too. Only this time, it didn't feel like desperation. It felt like freedom. And I knew then that my story was not just survival. It was proof that even when betrayal comes from the closest hearts, dignity can still be rebuilt, piece by piece. Looking back, I realize forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means forgiving yourself, for staying silent too long, for giving too much, for believing that sacrifice alone would buy you love. I still love Sarah and Daniel. That will never change. They are my children, bound to me by blood and memory. But love without respect is a prison. Love without boundaries becomes exploitation. It took me decades, a courtroom, and a heart nearly shattered to understand one truth that now guides me. Limits do not kill love. They reveal who truly loves you. I live differently now. I laugh more often. I care for myself without shame. And I no longer measure my worth by how much I give away. And though my children's absence aches, it no longer defines me. My life is still mine to live. So I ask you, as you listen to my story, what would you do in my place? Would you keep giving even as it destroyed you? Or would you finally draw the line, even if it meant standing alone? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to know your story too. And if my journey touched you, subscribe so we can walk together through more stories of family, loss, and the fragile power of forgiveness. Because if there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Even in the silence after betrayal, life whispers a new beginning, if only we dare to listen.